Morning. Feels like John got here first and got a hold of the air conditioner, so I might be able to keep the jacket on the whole time. I like it. So we're continuing our study in Galatians. We are moving to chapter 5 this morning. And I'll be finishing up this quarter, this month of August. Starting in Galatians chapter 5, we'll start with verses 1 and 2. Stand fast, therefore, in the liberty by which Christ has made us free, and do not be entangled again with the yoke of bondage. Indeed, I, Paul, say to you that if you become circumcised, Christ will profit you nothing. So he uses the word liberty in this translation, or the translation is freedom. But what do you think about when you hear the word liberty? What does it bring to mind for you?
Freedom to allow your rights.
Rights? Anybody else? So for me, when I hear the word liberty, it takes me back to U.S. history. It's really the first thing that comes to mind. Give me liberty or give me death?
That's where I really like to
First thing I thought of, Patrick Henry quote. So what did liberty mean to our founding fathers? What was it to them? What was their liberty, their freedom for?
Broke away from England.
I'm sorry?
They broke away from England.
Broke away from England. Broke away from the rules of England. Taxation. Did you go work? Sorry. Hearing. So there were a lot of things going on. They wanted freedom from their government, the government that they had at the time, which was far away. There were laws that required them to pay taxes. They didn't think that it was fair. Liberty was such a big deal to them. They were willing to go to war over it. And so we had the Revolutionary War. They even had the Liberty Bell created. So talking about the word liberty, the Liberty Bell. Interestingly enough, the word inscribed on the Liberty Bell comes from what? The Bible, Leviticus. It says, proclaim liberty throughout the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. It's from Leviticus chapter 25. So what does liberty mean to us as Christians? What's Paul talking about when he talks about liberty as Christians?
We're free from the law of Moses, all his precepts and regulations and everything.
Very similar to the freedom that our country faced a couple hundred years ago, or however long it was. That's what you're probably knows.
She doesn't laugh at Matthew.
Yeah, I didn't have, I don't remember the year.
242.
242 years ago. So it means the same thing for us as Christians, right? It means freedom from, liberty from the law of Moses, from these laws that are hard to keep, something that's hard for us to do. Liberty as a Christian is freedom from those things. Paul mentions the yoke of bondage. What's he talking about, the yoke of bondage? Why does he use those words?
Because you can't carry it. It's too heavy to try to keep up with all the law.
Yoke's a burden.
I'm not in here, I'm sorry.
Yoke is a burden.
A burden?
You
Yeah.
know, we had cows growing up. We had one old cow that always wanted to get on the other side of the fence for grass was greener. My dad took a big forky tree, tied it around her neck, made her drag it along so she couldn't walk through the fence. That was her yoke of bondage. So it was a burden to keep us where we're at.
It was a burden. There were a lot of laws, right? A lot of things
We're free from that.
a lot of things to study and remember. God's people at the time, it was just a burden to bear to live up to those laws. Paul uses the word entangled here. So he says, do not be entangled, again, with the yoke of bondage. So I thought about that. Yesterday at our house, our little robot vacuum cleaner, the kids started so they didn't clean up the cords out of the floor. So it got tangled up in the cords in the floor. So I said, well, just go untangle it. And Lindsay said, I don't know if they'll be able to. I tried the other day, it was difficult. I got it. I thought, I can't get that hard. So the girls went and tried it, and of course they couldn't get it done. So I went a little bit later, and I went to start untangling this thing. And it took me what seemed like forever to get it untangled. It was very frustrating. After I studied for several minutes, where the cord was, where it was tied up, how the wheels worked that it was tangled up in, I finally got it loose. So for me, it's that same concept of entangled is what Paul's talking about. They were entangled in the law of Moses. They were entangled in that yoke. It was something that was burdensome. It was something that was frustrating to them. They had to study and study and study to figure out how they're supposed to live their life in accordance to the laws. It was more complicated than it looked on the surface. So Paul says, don't be entangled with the laws of Moses. Don't let anyone force the old law on the Christ church and make it a burden on them. So remember, Paul preached the gospel to and worked with the Gentiles. They didn't necessarily study and know the law before Jesus came. So how were the churches becoming entangled with the law of Moses? It's not something that they lived by. They weren't Jews. How did they become entangled with the law of Moses? What was going on?
Judaizing teachers, Christians that claim themselves to be Christians anyway, who believe that they must follow most of the Jewish precepts, mainly circumcision, but there were some others too, but that was an everlasting thing, and that it was tied over into the New Testament also, and that you must be circumcised to be a Christian also. And so they were teaching them to hang on to the law, and not just that it was just a good thing to do, but that it was up to their salvation too.
So yeah, we looked at the end of June, we studied in Galatians 2, exactly what John's talking about, where many of the apostles had grown up living according to the Jewish law. They were going around to the churches where Paul had planted, the Gentile churches, and they were teaching some of these Jewish traditions, these Jewish things that weren't necessarily part of Christianity. And they were teaching them as if they were a requirement of following Christ. We saw in our lesson a few weeks ago, Paul called it out on their hypocrisy, telling them that they themselves don't believe that, so why are they pushing that on these new Christians? If they were still teaching or acting as if they were under the law, if God's people, so these people, these Judaizing Christians, as John called them, do you think they wanted to be free from the yoke of the law? The ones that were teaching the circumcision and other Jewish principles.
Well, I kind of think that they've gotten into it early on, just because we don't have to do this too. Yeah.
So they didn't know any better, or maybe not know any better, but they didn't really know any different. They'd grown up. I think we talked about this a few weeks ago. They'd grown up doing all these things. All these things were part of their religion. They were part of their lifestyle. They were ingrained in who they were. And so it was hard for a lot of them to let go of some of these things that they grew up learning. This is what we should be doing. They grew up learning that circumcision is something you do. It's the covenant of Abraham.
The problem with it was, there was something inherently wrong with any of the things really that they were teaching. If they chose to do those things, to keep those, Paul kept vows still, there were things that all of them still did in all the old law, but if it was binding it, because the fact was, the Bible said, if you were guilty in one part of the law, you were guilty in all of them. And the only way that you could become completely free of guilt was through Jesus, which had nothing to do with the law. He had put it to an end. He had completed it. And so, when they went back and started teaching these things, then they made themselves, I don't think of the word right now, but they were obliged to keep all of the law, not just the easy parts, or not, and I'm not saying they were necessarily easy, but they may not have gone to Jerusalem 3 times a year for the sacrifices, and they may not have done some of these other things, but the things that really had become a way of life to them, rather than just them living in them and going ahead and worshiping God through Christ, they were teaching the pagans, the Gentiles, that you have to do these things to be accepted.
I like the word you said, they were binding it to the new law. Mike?
One of my favorite musicals is The Fiddler on the Roof. And the main character is continually dealing with the dilemma of traditions. Traditions this, traditions that. And that's one of the big things was, I think you get to it became traditions, and they kind of multiplied this knot. They just kept adding to the knot through the traditions. And when you're looking at the tithing of the spices that they were doing, that they carried it to an extreme also. So that's kind of that was the culture that they were trying to hang on to.
I think one of the other problems was that they never really comprehended that they were failing at the law.
Right.
They almost always felt like they were keeping the law, even though they really weren't in the eyes of God. But they, in their own mind, thought they were, so therefore they were justified. And in doing that, there was not really that understanding of how much they really needed the grace of God through Jesus, because in their own mind, they kind of felt like, well, I'm doing the right things and whatever. And I mean, it wasn't until Jesus, look at Matthew 5, 6, and 7. He went through there and said, yeah, you think the law says this? But here's what it really says. And, he got some people really upset because he started going to the heart of the matter, what God really wanted from them, and it was not exactly what they thought they were supposed to do. And I just think that they thought that they were already kind of they were righteous because they had done the right things. And Paul was trying to rip that out of their mindset to say, no, you're not, and you're failing, therefore you've got to have this grace. And I think that's what Paul's trying to show, that distinction so much.
And I think this one, so the matter at hand that we talked that John said is throughout the New Testament is circumcision. Why do you think that circumcision was one of the biggest ones, one of the biggest customs that they persisted?
It began before the law of Moses. It had begun before it began with Abraham. His earliest big contact. And it said at this time that this will be a sign forever that you are my people, and all males will be circumcised on the 8th day. And if you're not, you will be cut off from my people. You are not a part of us. And and it wasn't something new. There were other cultures were doing that too. God didn't just invent it for the Jews, but He made it we just read the Revelation, the stamp on the foreheads of the Christians that would be the sign that they were children of God. Not in the same place, but this was a stamp.
So I agree. I think because it dated back before the Mosaic Law, and because it was all the way back to Abraham, it probably was one of their most sacred traditions that they had, because it came all the way back to Abraham.
Let's keep in mind now that we're talking here about the Jews and the Gentiles. You remember the Jews and Gentiles weren't best friends at all. And the Jews are saying, hey, we had to go through all this. What's the problem here? You're letting these Gentiles off so easy. Why should they have to suffer like we suffer? And I think the attitude there was the problem too.
Probably a lot of that going on as well. So let's continue on. We'll look at verses 3 and 4. It says, and I testify again to every man who becomes circumcised that he is a debtor to keep the whole law. You have become estranged from Christ, you who attempt to be justified by law. You have fallen from grace. So Paul is attempting to tell these Gentiles, he's attempting to help them remember the contrast between the Old Covenant and the New Covenant. He's reminding them that if they choose to live by the Old Covenant, like we've been saying, if they choose to live by that, then as Scott said, if you fall in one place, then you fall in all places. So if they choose to follow this because they think it is what makes them righteous, then they're also choosing to follow all the other laws. And they're choosing not to accept the grace of Christ that is the New Covenant. Moving on to verses 5 and 6. For we, through the Spirit, eagerly wait for the hope of righteousness by faith. For in Christ Jesus neither circumcision nor uncircumcision avails anything, but faith working through love. So Paul's saying to the church, remember our justification. Scott used that word earlier, they felt justified by the law. Paul's reminding them our justification comes through Christ, not through obedience to the law. In the new covenant, circumcision doesn't matter. It's not a thing to worry about one way or the other, is what he's telling them. Instead of circumcision, he's saying exercise your faith, working in love, teaching others to do the same. We see in Romans chapter 3, verses 20 through 24, Paul's talking similarly to the Romans. He says, because by the works of the law, no flesh will be justified in its sight. For through the law comes the knowledge of sin. But now apart from the law, the righteousness of God has been manifested, being witnessed by the law and the prophets, even the righteousness of God through faith in Jesus Christ, for all those who believe. For there is no distinction, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, being justified as a gift by his grace through the redemption which is in Christ Jesus. So the Jews were used to following the law as the means of justification. But the gospel is all about that justification coming not through their own actions, but justification for us is a gift. It's something that Christ gave freely to us that we didn't earn. It's not something that we are owed. It is just a gift that he gave us. It reminds me of the song. I may have talked about this in the Sunday school class before. I don't know if you've heard the song, Who Am I? It's called Who Am I? It says, who am I that the God of all the earth would care to know my name, would care to know my worth? Who am I that the Lord that calms the seas would care to reach out and calm the storm in me? And then the refrain is, who am I? Not because of what I've done, but it's because of who you are. It's not because of who I am, but it's because of what you've done. And so that's what he's talking about here. He's talking about this justification that we have is because of nothing that we've done. We can do personally. It's this gift of God.
One of the things I think is most interesting here is this is the Paul. Paul was the chief of sinners. Paul was just wants nothing more than to be saved by the grace of God, and somehow God just take care of him. Who was Saul, and they all knew it. Who was not just another guy, Jew. He was like the Jew of all Jews, which he tells us about, and we already knew that. I mean, he had righteousness pegged in his mind. And now he's trying to say, yeah, even as smart, as great, and all those things as I am, I'm as far away as you can get. You know? He pulls himself from as close to being righteous as he thinks he is, to as far away from righteous as he really is. And he makes himself in those two different things. And so when he writes this, those people go, wow, this is the guy that was, next in the line to be on the Sanhedrin. He actually worked for him, And so it had to have a major impact.
He said that all of those things that he had done were counted as trash, as worthless. And while we in church and in modern day Christian, we do not have this particular problem of bringing that part of the old law over. There is, those that still worship on the Sabbath and say that anybody else who worships on any other day but the Sabbath are lost. They're wrong. They have made, by pulling that over, they have made themselves accountable to going to Jerusalem 3 times a year. And all the blood sacrifices that are done. And people don't, they don't believe that. They believe that this was an everlasting covenant. And so because of that it never was taken out of the way. But the same argument applies. If it's not part of the will find it, any part of it, then you make yourself all of it.
I wonder if the class as a whole might be able to help me a little bit. I'm referring to Acts 15 and verse 29, where they were holding the Jerusalem council in regard to the Judaizing teachers. And they debated all this issue, and the decree that they agreed upon to message the letter to be sent to the Gentiles regarding the way they should look upon the Jewish law and the things that was required of it. We're starting with verse 28. It says, "For it seemed good to the Holy Spirit and to us to lay upon you no greater burden than these necessary things." So here's a small, short list of what they're considering necessary things that might be considered coming from the law. That you abstain from things offered to idols. Although in another place, I think the Apostle Paul says he wasn't set before you asking no questions. These things that mean offered to idols is nothing one way or the other. And from blood and from things strangled directly from the Jewish dietary laws. And of course, from sexual immorality, which is well ingrained in the New Testament, we know. So that's not an application. But I've always been a little, that if you keep yourself from these, you will do well, farewell. This verse has always troubled me a little bit. And as I say, I would really like some direction or thoughts from the class on what's going on here. Why were the apostles and it says, I think they gathered together the apostles and the elders and even the deacons and to hold this council. And they advised these new Christians who weren't from Jewish stock in regard to these things. And there, upon first reading, it appears to be a little contradiction. That's why I'm saying it's trouble.
There are a lot of those things, especially with Paul, where there are very definite looking contradictions in the way how he comports himself and what he teaches. I believe the answer to this is that this was not a bringing over of the old law, but these were things that were weaknesses that the Gentiles had, because they were eating meat offered to idols, and then they had blood still in them and all of that, and sexual immorality. These were all problems that the Gentile world was caught up in. And I believe that the answer is that they were saying that these were actually commands that were given him, that were in the old law too. They were making these commands, that it was unwise for them to be involved in any of those things, which might take them back into the pagan religions that they had come from. But I do know what you're saying, because, well, there are places where he absolutely stands up and will not allow things to happen, and then in another location, he denies, it appears that he denies that he taught any of that stuff, and takes
Maybe
vows.
he was drunk.
I know what you're talking about. I have been a little concerned about some of the things that, especially that Paul was involved in.
But, I mean, John, isn't it like today, I mean, we were literally given what, 2 commandments, to love they're doing wrong and what they need to fix.
He's removing stumbling blocks.
Right.
Bobby, you have something?
I think that, that these things that they imposed, these 4 things, were things that were not unique to the law of Moses. And after the flood, when God pronounced that man was able to eat various animals, he said, but they could not eat the blood that was in them. And that's in Genesis 9. And the reason that it seems like, as clarified by the law of Moses, is because blood was the currency of redemption. It was used as something like a representation of the life of an animal, or the life of Christ, for example. And so these things are not really so much part of the law of Moses. They were all imposed on man, separate and apart from the law of Moses. And so I think that it was a reiteration of these 4 universal rules. And so I think that that even now, we're not to eat blood, not because we adhere to the law of Moses, but because we recognize that blood has a special significance as the means by which man is redeemed. And these other things are all similar to that. So this is not a carrying forth of the law of Moses. And then James reiterated this in the 21st chapter of Acts when Paul came to Jerusalem. And he said, he repeated these 4 things, but he said that it was not wrong for them to circumcise their children or to keep customs. But these 4 things were the only things that were actually imposed on those people as they made a transition from Judaism to non-Judaism.
And so my interpretation, my answer, I guess, to your question is, a combination of what they've been saying is, back to what John said, is that what the issue with the circumcision was that they were binding into the law. I don't read in Acts chapter 15 where it's pointed out that they're saying this is bound to the law. I read it as they've said, this is something that is a universal law. It's something that, if you look back to the Old Testament and all the laws that they had, these are the ones that come up the most repeat offenders, if you will, that the people fell into. So to me, I don't read that passage as this is binding to the law, but these are the things that we talked about in the Old Testament and under the Old Covenant that you still need to make sure that you're not falling into these things to make sure you're trying to follow Christ. If that makes sense.
We're told that the life is in the blood. But back during the beginning of the law, that they were not they were supposed to drain all the blood out of the animal and not drink blood, because the life was in the blood. And this set up a timeless thing to remind them. It was set up pointing to the time of Christ to give his life by offering his blood that offered us life as we are washed in that blood. It was, I think, it is my belief that all of that, it really didn't matter about the animal, it didn't matter about all of those things. It was to teach a reverence for life, and more specifically, to point to the one life that would matter for all people, from Adam all the way down through eternity, that is blood.
We're definitely not going to finish. We'll do the next 2 verses, and then we'll finish up. So continuing in verse 7, it says, "You ran well. Who hindered you from obeying the truth?" This persuasion does not come from him who called you. We'll also do verse 9. A little leaven leavens the whole lump. So games like the Olympic Games were very popular during the time of the early church. And Paul, we've seen in other places, references the games. He references a race. So he likes to use that as an analogy when looking at the walk with Christ. So he's telling the church, you've run well. In other passages, he says to run in such a way or live in such a way as to win the race. So he's telling them, and when I left, last I saw you, you were running well. You were doing what you were taught. You were following the gospel, keeping on track, following the new covenant. But someone interfered. He's saying, who is that interfered? Somebody hindered you. Likely somebody who was running the same race. And so going with that analogy, I kind of think of running a race, somebody comes up beside you, and in this case, it's somebody that maybe is a local, you're not a local, and they're saying, hey, I've been here before, I live here, let's just take this road, because I know this road will get us to where we want to go. And so somebody's leading you astray. That's kind of the visualization that I get in my mind as he talks about this race and somebody hindering you. I think that still applies to us today. We're often hindered by somebody else running the same race as us, trying to live a life that is what is laid out in the New Testament. Somebody comes alongside us and they try to take us down this path that we know isn't right. We know that they're also a Christian. We know maybe we have respect for them as a Christian, so we go along with it. And rather than looking at our map, if you will, the scriptures, we just go along with what they say. So Paul tells them this persuasion, whoever it was that told you this, it did not come from Christ. This path that you're taking is not the path that Jesus laid out in the gospel. Somebody has led you astray. And then he says a little leaven leavens the whole lump. So what is Paul saying there when he says a little leaven leavens the whole lump?
It doesn't take much. It snowballs very quickly when you start moving away from the truth. We see the falling away in the 2nd century started with a little thing that seemed to be a good idea that man had injected into it. That one of the elders be specially trained to deal with the Gnostics. And then it wasn't that much time until that one became the head elder. And it grew into what it eventually became the Catholic Church in just a couple of 100 years. So it doesn't take much of it to leaven everything.
I think that is all the time we have. So we'll pick up here next week and